go. All right, how about pull out today's egg and pass it over to your sister? That's right, the light yellow. All right, what's in that one?
The crown of thorns.
The crown of thorns? What do you know about the crown of thorns?
That's what they pushed under Jesus' head when he was about
Well, we're going to hear about that story today. Show them the crown of thorns real quick so they can all see what it is. Okay, there we go. All right, now put it back in its egg, and let's look at our story today, because the crown of thorns, it come right after Jesus was scourged. And if you guys remember, we read that story in our last video. Jesus was scourged, and the next thing that happened was the crown of thorns. In John 19, verse 2, it says, "And the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in a purple robe." And then Matthew told us in his gospel that they knelt before him after doing all of that. They had put a reed in his hand too, Matthew said. And after doing all of that, they knelt before him and mocked him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Like they were making fun of him. And then they spit on him. And they took that reed out of his hand and they struck him in the head with it. And that was with that crown of thorns sitting on top of his head. And then they hit him with a wooden reed on top of that too. And the crown of thorns, it had all these really big thorns. They weren't the little bitty thorns. The thorns were like that long, about that long, an inch long or so. Very sharp. And when they had finished mocking him, they stripped him of his robe and put his own clothes back on him, and they led him away to crucify him. Jesus was their king, but they didn't know it yet. Do you realize that? That's kind of scary to think about, isn't it, for them? Because if they had known who they were mocking, they wouldn't have been mocking him at all, would they?
No.
You know what they were revealing about their own hearts? They were just like the rest of us. They were sinful. And they were really big bullies, weren't they? They were mean bullies to Jesus.
And they were like those people when the woman who had brought that bottle of expensive, hard-to-find perfume and poured it on Jesus' feet. The people said, she shouldn't be doing it. She's a really big criminal.
That's right. They were kind of hypocritical,
But they were the evil
weren't they?
ones.
Yeah, and they were really evil of heart. Well, these Roman soldiers are showing that they have some evil hearts too, because they're mistreating Jesus, they're mocking him, they're spitting on him, they're beating him. If they had have understood his teaching about the coming of the kingdom and that he was really the king, they wouldn't have done all of that, would they? But they were making fun of what he had been charged with. They mocked him, thinking to themselves, if he really is God, let him save himself. But he didn't.
Because he loves us too much.
Yeah. Why do you think he didn't save us? Because he does love us so much. And he knew that God the Father's plan of salvation had to be done. He had already taught that and made it really clear to us that Jesus had come for a particular reason. And it wasn't what anyone expected. They all expected that warrior king, remember? But he came as the Lamb of God. And it could only be accomplished if he endured all the scourging, if he endured the crown of thorns, if he endured their mocking and their spitting and their beatings. He had to endure all of that, and ultimately the death on the cross. And he did all of that because he loves us. Jesus came to die for the very people who were torturing him, yet they chose not to believe in him. People try to tell us today, oh, don't believe in that story about Jesus. There ain't no truth to that. Don't believe them. Don't listen to them. Listen to Jesus and what he said, and listen to what he did in real history. Because history tells us that Jesus did do all these things, and that all this did happen to him. We should be very careful, too. This lesson teaches us to be careful not to mistreat those who believe differently than we do. Because the Romans, they were mistreating Jesus because he believed differently than they did. Because he knew the truth. And they didn't. And so they were mistreating him. But we shouldn't be that way.
No.
Do you know how Jesus responded? He responded with love because he first loved us, right? We can love because Jesus first loved us. The Bible tells us that. It teaches us that that's the case. What is it, sweetie?
And the people who were treating Jesus meanly, they hated him.
Yeah, they were just being mean people. They just seemed to hate people in general, didn't they? But do you know what was incredible about this? The very opposite of what they did, hating them, Jesus loved them. He loved them so much that he asked the Father from the cross to forgive them for what they were doing, because they didn't know what they were doing. So we need to be more like Jesus when we experience the thorns of other people's hatred toward us. We need to love them. We need to respond in love rather than in hate like they do. And that is something that Easter reminds us of yearly as well. It reminds us not only of his love for us, but how we should love others, because that is what he did for us.
And if Adam and Eve hadn't eaten the fruit that God told them not to eat, there wouldn't be such thing as sin.
That's true. That's true, but they didn't, did they? They disobeyed God, and so sin entered into the world. So Jesus had to come because he had to save his people. And that's a good thing to remember.
But before Adam and Eve existed, Satan was already sinful.
Yeah, Satan brought sin into the world, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
He told Adam and Eve to eat the fruit.
Yeah. So Jesus came to defeat Satan, to defeat sin, and to defeat death. And guess what? He did all three things when he came. And Easter reminds us of all of that. And I think that's a good place for us to stop today, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So stay tuned for our next video, and we'll talk more about whatever's in our next resurrection egg in the next video. Girls, tell everybody to have a great day, and we will see them in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.